Chapter 11. The night was deep and silent as Shu Qing sprinted through the scavenger camp. He moved with the grace of a cat, but inside he was struggling. He had inhaled a deadly poison gas during his fight with the scavenger Fat Mountain. To stay quiet, he clamped his hand over his mouth, forcing back the urge to cough. His lungs felt like they were on fire, and his skin turned a sickly white from the strain. When he finally reached his small cabin in Sergeant Thunder's courtyard, he couldn't hold it back anymore. He collapsed and coughed up a mouthful of black, hissing blood. As the toxic liquid hit the floor, it sizzled like acid. Instead of panicking, Shu Qing sat down and began to meditate. He knew he had a secret weapon, the violet crystal embedded in his chest. As he breathed, the crystal glowed with a soft light, slowly repairing his damaged lungs and neutralizing the poison. Shu Qing realized he had made the right choice by trusting the crystal's healing power to finish the fight quickly. Once he felt better, Shu Qing looked through the bags of the two men he had killed, Horse 4 and Fat Mountain. He found spirit coins, the local currency, poison bottles, jars of dangerous chemicals, and a strange piece of iron. This was what Fat Mountain was so desperate to get. It looked like junk, but Shu Qing knew it had to be valuable for a man to die for it. A piece of amber, a mysterious item Fat Mountain tried to use before he died. Unable to figure out what the iron and amber were yet, he hid them away and spent the rest of the day in deep meditation, reaching the second level of chi condensation. In the evening, Sergeant Thunder called Shu Qing out to the courtyard. A large table was set with a feast. Soon, the other legendary members of Squad Thunderbolt arrived. Savage Ghost, a giant of a man, muscular and intimidating. He carried a massive steel shield and a club with wolf teeth spikes that were taller than Shu Qing himself. Graceful Raptor, a beautiful but dangerous woman. She could control animals. The stray dogs around the camp were her eyes and ears. And Crucifix, a tall, thin man with a cross-shaped scar on his face. He was the strongest of the three, a level 4 expert with a bow and sharp, piercing eyes. The team was skeptical of Shu Qing because he was young and seemingly weak. Crucifix even complained that they would have to protect him, but Sergeant Thunder insisted Shu Qing join them for a special mission to find 7-leaf clovers. The reward was dust-purging pills, which are much more powerful than the usual medicine. The next morning, the squad headed out. The camp was buzzing with news of a traveling physician who was healing people for a high price, but as they walked, the mood turned cold. Blocking their path was Squad Bloodshadow, a rival group known for being brutal and bloodthirsty. Their captain, a wild-looking old man, was sitting on the ground, casually eating the leg of a dead dog. Shu Qing's heart skipped a beat when he heard the captain growl, "Where are Fat Mountain and Horse 4? They're late." Shu Qing realized he was standing right in front of the boss of the men he had just murdered. Even worse, the dog the captain was eating belonged to Graceful Raptor. She shook with rage as the Blood Shadow captain looked at her and licked his lips, saying, "This dog is delicious. I wonder what you taste like." The air became heavy with tension. A massive fight was just one wrong move away. Chapter 12. The tension between the two squads was like a stretched rubber band ready to snap. After the leader of Squad Bloodshadow insulted Graceful Raptor, she burned with rage. But she didn't rush in. Instead, she looked to Sergeant Thunder. Sergeant Thunder remained calm. He looked at his archer and said one word, "Crucifix." Without hesitation, Crucifix fired an arrow high into the sky. It moved like a lightning bolt, piercing a hawk that had been circling above. The bird exploded in a cloud of red feathers and crashed to the ground between the two groups. Immediately, one of the Blood Shadow members collapsed, coughing up blood. The hawk was his spirit animal. Because their souls were linked, the bird's death caused him physical pain. This was a warning. Sergeant Thunder's eyes were like ice as he stared down the Blood Shadow captain. After a long, silent standoff, both leaders snorted in disgust. "Let's go," Sergeant Thunder growled. As they walked away, Shu Qing looked back. The Blood Shadow members were still waiting for Fat Mountain and Horse 4 to show up. Shu Qing knew they would be waiting forever. The group hiked for an hour until they reached the Forbidden Region. It was a terrifying sight. While the sun shone brightly outside, the jungle was covered in dark storm clouds and flickering lightning. As Shu Qing stepped inside, he felt a sudden bone-chilling cold. It felt exactly like the ruined city he grew up in. To survive, he gripped his iron skewer and sharpened his focus. This place was a nightmare. Twisted trees looked like reaching ghosts. The mud smelled like rotting bodies. The leaves looked like sharp teeth. Squad Thunderbolt moved with practiced skill. They avoided safe-looking paths and walked through dangerous ones because they knew the secrets of the jungle. They took turns leading the way, using special incense to keep poisonous bugs away. When they stopped to rest near a marsh, the squad began smearing thick mud all over their bodies. Sergeant Thunder explained the rules of survival to Shu King. Animal clues. Avoid piles of leaves. It means animals don't walk there. And follow animal droppings. It means the path is safe from quicksand. The mud. This specific mud contained the skin of night lizards. It hid their human scent from monsters. Mutation warning. Crucifix warned Shu King to watch the black spots on his skin. The mutagen in the air was so strong that if you breathed too much or stayed too long, you would turn into a monster. Shu King listened carefully. He also learned about weapons. His iron skewer was a prized treasure, a common but useful magical tool. Higher-level items like magical treasures were powerful but carried a heavy price of corruption. As they moved deeper, Crucifix and Graceful Raptor taught Shu King about the 4 things that kill scavengers. Unknown beasts, monsters from the deep jungle that occasionally wander to the edges. The singing, a mysterious music that sometimes plays in the woods. If you hear it, you die. Only Sergeant Thunder had ever heard it and survived. The fog of confusion, a thick mist that makes people lose their way until the mutagen in the air kills them. Other scavengers, humans who hide in the bushes to ambush you. Suddenly, Sergeant Thunder froze. "Quiet," he commanded. Shu King's hair stood on end. In the darkness of the trees, hundreds of glowing eyes appeared. They were black-scaled wolves, each as big as an ox and covered in armor-like scales. These wolves usually lived deep in the jungle. Something was wrong. The squad was in trouble. If they fought hundreds of wolves, they would have to use too much energy. If they used too much energy, they would absorb the poisoned air and mutate. "Everyone withdraw," Sergeant Thunder ordered. He stepped forward. His power exploded outward, twice as strong as anyone in the group. He stood alone against the hungry pack, his eyes fixed on the hundreds of hungry predators. Chapter 13. Squad didn't just watch, they moved like a well-oiled machine. Crucifix, Savage Ghost, and Graceful Raptor began knocking down massive trees, creating a series of wooden walls with narrow openings. This was their relay strategy. By creating these bottlenecks, they forced the wolf pack to fight them one at a time. The squad members took turns. Sergeant Thunder would fight until he was tired, then run to the very back to rest. Savage Ghost would step up next to block the path with his shield. Graceful Raptor would follow, using her blood magic and traps. Crucifix would take the next turn, while also providing cover fire from the trees. This allowed each person to fight, retreat, and meditate to recover their spirit power without being overwhelmed by the poisonous air. Finally, it was Shu Kyung's turn. He hid in the mud, waiting as Crucifix retreated past him. When the wolves arrived, they were frenzied by the smell of blood. They didn't even see Shu Kyung until it was too late. Shu Kyung moved like a demon. His iron skewer flashed, stabbing eyes and throats with terrifying precision. He wasn't just using weapons, he used his bare fists to shatter wolf skulls. Because of the violet crystal in his chest, Shu Kyung had a secret advantage: super healing. Every time a wolf bit or scratched him, the wound closed in seconds. He fought longer and harder than anyone expected. He stood over a mountain of dead wolves, soaked from head to toe in dark red blood. Even the wolves began to feel afraid of this silent, blood-stained boy. High in the trees, Crucifix and Sergeant Thunder watched in total shock. They had never seen a newbie fight with such savage intensity. Just as Sergeant Thunder called for Shu Kyung to retreat, something strange happened. Shu Kyung killed a wolf that had unusual black eyes. As the creature died, its shadow twisted and crawled across the ground like a living snake. The shadow touched Shu Kyung's foot. Suddenly, an overwhelming feeling of pure evil flooded his body. It felt like a cold, oily poison trying to snatch his soul.
But before the evil could spread, the violet crystal in his chest reacted. It sent out a wave of ice-cold energy that crashed against the darkness. In an instant, the evil feeling vanished. It wasn't just gone, it felt like the crystal had swallowed the shadow whole. Shu Kyung fell back to the safety of the rear lines. Graceful Raptor, looking impressed and worried, handed him a bag of healing pills. Savage Ghost gave him a look of deep respect. Shu Kyung sat down to meditate and check his body. He expected to be covered in mutation blotches, the black spots caused by the jungle's poison. Usually after a hard fight in the Forbidden region, a scavenger's body is heavily corrupted. But when Shu Kyung pulled up his sleeve, he gasped. One of his mutation blotches was gone. Instead of getting sicker from the fight, he'd actually become cleaner. He realized the violet crystal hadn't just healed his cuts. When it ate that shadow, it seemed to have purified his body. He was still at the second level of power, but he felt stronger and faster than ever before. He looked back into the dark woods, his eyes narrowing. He had more questions than answers. What was that shadow? And what exactly is this crystal inside me?
Chapter 14. Shu Qing's questions about his violet crystal and his shifting shadow would have to wait. As the members of Squad Thunderbolt rotated through their battle positions, it was his turn to jump back into the fray. The battle against the wolf pack lasted throughout the night. For Shu Qing, this fight was like a grindstone, sharpening his skills and making him more lethal than ever. By dawn, the squad was at its breaking point. Their bodies were heavy with mutagen, the jungle's poison, and they were close to turning into monsters. Finally, the remaining wolves gave up and vanished into the trees. The squad collapsed, gasping for air. Graceful Raptor and Savage Ghost looked at Shu Qing with deep gratitude. Without his incredible endurance, they might not have survived the night. Sergeant Thunder was not relieved. He was suspicious. He realized the wolves didn't attack by accident. They seemed to be hunting something. He ordered everyone to check their bags. They found the culprit in Savage Ghost's bag, a tattered wooden box containing insect-repelling powder. Graceful Raptor realized the powder was a fake. It was actually made from a substance that, when triggered, attracts scaled creatures like the black-scaled wolves. Someone had tricked Savage Ghost back at the camp. The culprit was obvious: Squad Blood Shadow. They had sent the wolves to weaken Thunderbolt so they could finish them off later. Despite the danger, the squad decided to finish their mission. They reached a hidden canyon that looked like a different world. There were no trees here, only glowing flowers with 7 leaves that looked like stars in a night sky. This was the 7-leaf clover harvesting point. While the others worked, Shu Qing sat down to meditate. He pushed his sea and mountain cultivation technique to the limit. Suddenly, popping sounds echoed from his bones. Filth and old blood pushed out of his pores as his body reached the 3rd level of body refinement. But something was wrong. Usually, the poison, mutagen, from the air would settle in a person's skin, forming black spots. But as Shu Qing practiced, he noticed the poison wasn't going into his arm. It was being sucked into his own shadow. It was as if his shadow had become a hungry mouth, eating the darkness so his body stayed pure. Sergeant Thunder divided the harvest into 5 parts, giving Shu Qing his fair share. Then he delivered the grim news: they had to split up. Since Sergeant Thunder was the main target of Squad Blood Shadow, he would act as a distraction while the others ran for the camp. "Get back to the camp as fast as you can," Thunder told Shu Qing. One by one, the squad members vanished into the brush. Shu Qing moved through the jungle with his new enhanced speed. He saw terrifying things: giant spiders riding on the backs of mutant bears like puppets, a mountain-sized jellyfish floating in the sky, trailing frozen death and filled with rotted animal corpses. Shu Qing realized how lucky he was. Because his shadow ate the poison, he could stay in the Forbidden region longer than any other human. He was becoming a pure human, something extremely rare in this broken world. As the sun began to set, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the trees. Shu Qing recognized the voice. It was Savage Ghost. He crept through the trees and looked down at a horrific scene. Savage Ghost was dead. He had been decapitated, and his body was turning a sickly green, a sign that he had mutated into a monster just before he died. He had fought bravely, his shield was shattered, and several enemies lay dead around him. But the horror wasn't over. Nearby, Shu Qing saw Sergeant Thunder surrounded by 5 enemies. His skin was also turning green. He was exhausted, poisoned, and trapped on the edge of death. Shu Qing's eyes turned cold. He gripped his iron skewer, his heart filling with a dark, murderous intent. He wasn't going to let his mentor. Chapter 15. The sun was setting. looking like a dying old man struggling for one last breath. The forest was growing dark and cold, filled with a sinister chill. In the center of a small clearing, Sergeant Thunder was fighting for his life. He was surrounded by Squad Bloodshadow. 5 enemies were there. Captain Bloodshadow, an old man in the 6th level of power. He was wild, muscular, and cruel. Flamecrow, a hunchback, ugly man in the 5th level who used fire magic. 3 lackeys, 3rd level scavengers who blocked the exits. The captain taunted Sergeant Thunder, telling him to commit suicide before the jungle's poison turned him into a green monster. Flamecrow joined in, laughing about how they would sell Zhu Qing as a living treasure and hurt Graceful Raptor once the sergeant was dead. High in the trees, Zhu Qing watched. He felt a deep sense of gratitude towards Sergeant Thunder. He wasn't going to run away. He waited for the perfect moment, his eyes burning with murderous intent. Zhu Qing moved like an arrow shot from a bow. He was so fast that he left blurry images behind him. Before the enemies even knew he was there, he was among them. The first lackey didn't even have time to scream before Zhu Qing's iron skewer pierced his temple. The second scavenger tried to jump, but Zhu Qing punched him with the full power of the 3rd level of the sea and mountain incantation. The punch was so strong it caved in his chest and exploded out through his back. The 3rd scavenger looked up just in time to see a dagger flying at his face. It hit him with such force that it crushed his skull. In the time it takes for a single spark to fly, 3 men were dead. Zhu Qing stood there, his long hair covering his face, looking like a vengeful wolf. Sergeant Thunder screamed for Zhu Qing to run, but it was too late. Flamecrow, the fire user, stepped forward. He was confident. To him, a body cultivator like Zhu Qing was nothing compared to a magic cultivator like himself. Zhu Qing charged, but Flamecrow raised an invisible spirit power barrier. When Zhu Qing's fist hit the wall, it didn't break. Instead, the force bounced back, dislocating Zhu Qing's wrist with a loud crack. Flamecrow laughed, calling him a moron, but he stopped laughing when Zhu Qing, without changing his expression, violently snapped his own wrist back into place and punched the wall again. This time, the barrier shattered. Flamecrow grew serious. He waved his hands and summoned 3 massive fireballs. The heat was so intense, the air began to wobble. Zhu Qing realized he couldn't outrun them. He grabbed one of the dead bodies nearby and threw it at a fireball. The corpse turned to ash in seconds. When the other fireballs exploded, Zhu Qing was caught in the blast. The heat covered his body in blisters, and he felt like his insides were being cooked. Flamecrow thought the fight was over. He turned his back on the smoke and fire, walking toward his captain. "Your people are worthless, Sergeant." But Captain Bloodshadow's face went pale with shock. Flamecrow turned around just in time to see a scrawny, burnt figure burst out of the flames. It was Zhu Qing. Zhu Qing threw his dagger and his iron skewer with everything he had. The dagger sliced off Flamecrow's ear, and the iron skewer sank deep into his chest. Flamecrow coughed up blood, staggering back in rage. He looked at Zhu Qing, who was kneeling in the dirt, covered in burns and blisters. But through the pain, his eyes were like ice, deadly, silent, and ready to finish the kill.